9 o'clock Eastern time. Thank you for joining, whether you're watching on YouTube or here on Two-Way. Very grateful to you for making time this evening. If you're on the East Coast, a little earlier out West, I got a ton of reporting that I'm hoping to get to, but there's also some great people on that I want to get to as quickly as I can. So I'm just going to run through some highlights. Reminder for those or letting those know who are new to Two-Way, is a platform for substantive, long conversations that are meant to be sophisticated, bipartisan, and friendly. We're here to learn, not to fight or criticize each other. If somebody says something that's maybe not exactly how they wanted to phrase it, extend to them the presumption of grace. But again, we're here to learn and get along, not to fight. Great people on here. I'm fascinated by what's going on with the vice president. And while Donald Trump and Joe Biden are still obviously players here, what's going on with the vice president? There's so many different things. Just incredible amount of developments in her first full day as the presumptive nominee, which is what she is now. So I'm going to run through a few things. Then I'm going to want to bring in John Lawrence, who was Nancy Pelosi's longtime chief of staff, who's got a strong point of view about the deep stakes. I'm going to want to bring in Tom Rogers, if he's here and willing and able to talk, who's written a very provocative piece about the vice president and her ascending to the nomination. And David Burrell, great pollster, who's a great friend of Two-Ways, to talk about what the latest polls say and how we should read them and what we should expect going forward. As always, want to get you involved. Raise your hand if you want to get involved. We'll get to you eventually. And there's some other people I'm expecting who I haven't seen yet, but there's some other folks who are great political minds who we're going to want to bring in as well. So, tale of two campaigns right now as I see it for the vice president. Let me tell you the things that are going super well that would make you think, if you only saw these things, she's on a roll here. Grassroots and fat cat enthusiasm for fundraising is massive, record-breaking. We'll see if it sustains, but it's obviously always a sign, not just get you good press coverage and not just put the money in the bank, but that represents enthusiasm from elites, from the grassroots, extraordinarily important. And you can feel that throughout the party. Throughout the party, there's a sense of possibility and not the dread and antagonism that existed up until Joe Biden's announcement. She's on a glide path to nomination. The AP has reported she already has enough delegates to be the nominee. No one's running against her. All the people who might have considered running against her, never was going to happen. All of them have endorsed her. And I think, with the exception of the Republicans who are still carping about a coup and all of that, the media is not saying, there's something illegitimate about this process. There are all sorts of ideas about what the vice president should do across a range of issues. I'm putting that in the positive category just because there's this kind of let 1,000 flowers bloom sensibility now, a great enthusiasm to help and offer assistance. The convention now is a hot place to go. Celebrities, politicians, donors, whereas before Chicago was being looked at with dread, now it's a place where people are looking at to really be excited and be part of something. This next thing I'm going to list is a little complicated, and I don't want to be accused of mansplaining, but I'm going to do my best to say this right. There's a group of women, not just in Washington, but around the country, who are seared by and scarred by the experience with Secretary Clinton, and they have vowed to not let the press and the public and social media do to Vice President Harris what was done to Secretary Clinton. I've been outspoken in talking, particularly in 2008 and then again in 2016, but I saw it more severely in 2008 to some extent. The sexist coverage of Secretary Clinton and biased coverage against her, I was outspoken at the time about it. This group of women, and it's almost all women, are fierce about this. And it's a real asset because they're smart, experienced, substantive, and aggressive and fierce. And they're going to defend her in all sorts of ways that probably if they had this attitude and these programmatic ideas in 2016, Hillary Clinton would have won. Whether you think J.D. Vance is going overboard in his criticism of Vice President Harris or not, Democrats do, and they're feeling good about that. They're feeling in a fighting spirit about it, and Democrats feel now that Donald Trump's going to make a lot of mistakes, and Vice President Harris is going to be able to take advantage of those. That's my list of positives. Now, let me tell you the things that are going on, mostly behind the scenes, that are cautionary. Number one, the vetting of potential running mates. I've said this before. The vice president's not been vetted. I can virtually guarantee you there are going to be stories about her past that are going to surprise people and potentially damaging. But these 4 and maybe more possible running mates. They're just being vetted on the fly in a very ad hoc way. It's not clear to me that they've turned over any documents yet. And the clock's ticking, right? Even if she names the person at the convention, it's not that much time to do a normal vet. Cooper, Shapiro, Bashir, and Kelly. I still think Kelly's the one to watch. Personnel. She announced today that she's keeping on the current campaign team. It's been reported that they're courting David Plouffe to come in. It is a big mess, and so far they're handling it okay. But personnel in a presidential campaign or any big enterprise, super complicated. The vice president doesn't have a great history of dealing with personnel. Keep watching to see how she gets this in place, building the airplane while they fly it. There's just too much to do. And I've been thinking about Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama. How would they be dealing with the reality of how do you spend your day? When do you sleep? When do you exercise? Do you still go to fundraisers? Which meetings do you go to? Who comes to the meetings? There's just a lot to do. And again, a lot of pressure. The vice president, not great under pressure historically. So that's another thing to keep your eye on, is how she's spending her time. The polls are mixed. There's enough positive polling data to not have people panic, but they're definitely mixed. And it's not impossible that if she makes a few mistakes early, that she could start to see a downward tick, and that could be problematic. I think the most serious thing, or I shouldn't say the most serious thing, but the thing I close with, which is a real problem, which Tom Rogers is going to talk about, is there's people who are saying, I can't believe we spent all this time and energy getting rid of Joe Biden as the nominee, only to get Kamala Harris, who has a lot of weaknesses, and the belief that anyone else could beat Donald Trump. But the party may be turning to nominate the only other person besides Joe Biden who could not beat her. I don't agree with that, but I understand the point of it. She certainly has negatives. She's certainly attached to the administration, but these other people don't have experience, and she now has a lot of experience on the national, international stage. May not be enough, but hopefully Tom Rogers will come on to talk about that. But that's something that I've heard from several sources, and you're seeing a lot of people write that about her weakness, and some of them are suggesting it's not too late. Maybe the party should figure out a way to nominate someone else, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I want to call on a few people, and I believe John Lawrence has a heart out, as we say. So John, if you could unmute, I'd love to bring you in and ask you about what you wrote. Thank you for joining. John Lawrence worked with Speaker Pelosi as chief of staff, I think, for 8 years. And John, really grateful and to welcome you to Two Way, and to ask you first, I want to talk to you about Mark Kelly. But first, I want to ask you about how you see the role the speaker played over the last 3 weeks. I don't know if you have inside information or not, but how do you view what she was able to do?
Well, thanks, Mark. I appreciate the invitation to participate in Two Way. I would say that I don't have inside information, but I was at her side for 8 years. I think I had a pretty good sense of how she operates, and I think that her role was twofold. Number one was, and maybe highest priority as always, was to listen to and then reflect what the members of her caucus were saying and communicate that accurately. I think she probably would understand, and I certainly do as well, that Biden undoubtedly took that information with a certain grain of salt, because politicians do have a way of looking out for themselves. As Phil Burton used to say, after my district, I'm concerned about your district. But I think that the other piece of it is that Pelosi had a longstanding political and also personal relationship with Joe Biden. And I think that she was able to communicate something that went beyond simply the uneasiness of her members, and that reflected some of the concern about his legacy and how he would be perceived if this campaign were to seriously go south and cost the House and the Senate and the White House. And so I think she was able to play that role. Nancy Pelosi, as you well know, Mark, and I think most of the people on this call, she's a very hard political realist. And there were many times during the many campaigns that were conducted while I was her chief of staff, where she would have to deliver bad news to candidates she liked, in some cases candidates that she had recruited, that the numbers weren't there, or that the money wasn't there, or the ground game wasn't there, and they were going to have to be cut loose. Publicly, she and the DCCC chairs would always deny that. But of course, they cut people loose because you had to concentrate your money. And I think that, she brought that same frankness and, with a strong overlay of personal concern, but still a frankness to those conversations. There was no question in my mind that was going to be done quietly. It was going to be done on the inside. All the noise that you heard in the immediate aftermath of the debate, demanding that Biden get out, that was obviously going to force him and his people into a very defensive crouch. That is not the way Nancy Pelosi proceeds. But nevertheless, over time, I think she made that case in all likelihood with increased forcefulness and probably with some increased public leaks that she was very discouraged about the status of the campaign.
Right. Two more questions about that and then move to Kelly. Number one, my sense from my sources is that when the history of this is written in full, the speaker's role will be much bigger than was seen above the surface. Would that be your instinct?
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, okay. My sense also of her view of vice president, her fellow Californian, is similar to Joe Biden's view, which is high doubts that she can win a general election. So I'm wondering if you think she would have preferred a different nominee, but just saw the reality, or I'm wrong and she's actually enthusiastic about this. And that would be her first choice.
Mark, on that, I'm just going to take a pass because I really just don't know. Vice President Harris wasn't even in the Senate at the point where I left Mrs. Pelosi's staff in 2013, and I don't really know the nature of the relationship between the two of them. She obviously they go back to the vice president's days as district attorney in San Francisco and attorney general, but whether or not what the nature of that relationship is, certainly what the levels of confidence are, I would be inventing it. And I learned a long time ago not to speak for Nancy Pelosi.
Yep. All good. So now, Mark Kelly, I think if the list is really those four, Beshear, Cooper, Shapiro, Kelly, I think Kelly is the strongest. And I know that I feel that in part because a lot of Republicans think it's the strongest. So you've written about this. I'd love for you to just explain what you see in Mark Kelly as a strong pick for the vice president.
So I guess this is the point where I should say I just wrote a blog on this on my blog today. It's called Domocracy. And whatever I say now is spelled out in some greater detail in that blog. I think that Kelly
is that on Substack? How do people find that?
It's on WordPress. So if you just Google Domocracy, it'll pop up.
Okay, go ahead, John.
I would say that Kelly has a number of strengths. Number one is I think it's always a good idea for Democrats to have somebody on the ticket who has foreign policy or military experience. Kelly has a long record, although he's best known as an astronaut for 4 trips into space. He also had a long record as a Navy aviator, 39 missions over Iraq, 2 distinguished service crosses, and many other awards for his long military service. And I think that that is useful both in terms of the expertise that it brings to Democrats with respect to dealing with national security, which is obviously a very important issue. Also, the immediate military concerns we have with NATO and with Ukraine, but I think also because it will give the ticket the ability to contrast with some of the incredibly insensitive statements that President Trump has made with respect to not only veterans, people who have died in the wars, and we all know those very unpleasant quotes that have been attributed to him, but also that it allows Mark has the ability to identify with his predecessor in the Senate, John McCain, who he has very strong feelings about and has tried to model himself on a bipartisan or at least a less partisan type of interaction with other members in the McCain mold, and for that reason has emerged as a strong candidate in the Senate and won in a swing state. And I think building on that kind of military expertise and on the record of bipartisanship that, as contrasted, for example, with a Vance or a Trump, really gives him the ability, not having been in the midst of these the culture wars and the bitter ideological divide, allows him to play that role somewhat uniquely. I would just say the last point is that there's obviously an enormous sympathetic factor here, given the terrible injuries that were done to Gabby Giffords, his wife, when she was a member of Congress, and because of those injuries, how Kelly ended up getting into politics in the first place, which was never his intention. And I think that positions him to speak about the issue of gun violence in a responsible way. The group that he set up after Gabby's near death was not an extreme gun group by any means. It talked about reasonable bipartisan methods. And so I think he's able to send this message of coming from a border state, trying to reach across the aisle and doing so successfully, and filling up that gap that exists in Democrats very often on national tickets about national security and international affairs. I just think he covers those bases better for me than a good governor in a swing state that probably you can't carry. I don't know that you can carry North Carolina. I very much doubt you're going to carry Kentucky. And I think those governors, whether it's a Josh Shapiro or an Andy Beshear, they're going to work those states anyway. But I don't know that they send a national message the way somebody with that set of expertise and personal story that a Mark Kelly can. So I think on balance that he's a strong position for vice president and brings a lot to the ticket that some of those other good candidates don't.
Yeah, I agree with you about the national message. And I'm one who almost always says the vice president only does one thing. It validates the judgment of the presidential candidate that they can choose someone ready to be president. I think in this case, there may be an alchemy between them that would be more powerful than just the one state. Do you know him personally? You called him Mark. I don't know if that means you know him.
I do, because I was very close friends with Gabby when she was in the House. And I got to know Mark in his astronaut phase, not in his Senate phase. I've always been interested in the space program, and so I have gotten to know him, and I've stayed in close touch with him and with Gabby over the years. But
Awesome.
that's not really why that doesn't motivate my evaluation of who constitutes.
Understand. But it means you have a feel for him. John, stay with us if you would. We'd love for you to chime in throughout if you have the time. And I want to bring in Tom Rogers now. Tom also has Capitol Hill experience and has written lots of pieces about this race and concerns about Donald Trump finding a path back to the White House. So, Tom, I'd love for you to describe the piece you've written and why you feel strongly that the party may be nominating the only other person who couldn't win the election in the view of some.
Thanks, Mark. Well, I wouldn't go quite that far. The piece I wrote was Kamala Harris is the weakest of any of the talk about candidates. Whether she can win and pull out a victory here, I think, is another issue. Yep. But
sorry to mischaracterize. Go ahead.
The issue for me was going back over the last 12, 18 months. Every conversation I had with any Democrat, any media person, was the biggest issue Biden is going to have is his age issue, well before the debate catastrophe. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris isn't a good answer to that, because almost universally, people felt that if somebody had to take over for Biden, most would recoil from thinking that Kamala Harris was ready to be commander in chief. And some felt that she could be replaced without major political consequence. Many thought it was impossible to replace her without huge political consequence. Most thought that, hey, it didn't matter. She wasn't going to be replaced and she was going to be on the ticket. How we got from there to 24 hours after Biden steps aside, she is essentially coronated as the nominee, is somewhat mind-boggling to me. And it is further mind-boggling, not because of the history of how I think she was universally viewed as not being an answer to the age problem that Biden posed, but 5 issues that really stamp her in ways that none of the other talked about candidates have to deal with. And we talked about this yesterday on two-way, but just to summarize those 5 issues quickly. Being an incumbent today anywhere in the world is not a good thing. UK, France, India. She is obviously going to be tagged as an incumbent. Two, Fox News is already starting with this. She's concealer in chief. Anybody close to Biden knew that there was an issue in terms of mental infirmity. She was around him all the time. The fact that people think the best thing about Biden stepping aside is the biggest issue that the Democrats were facing was his age goes away. And with her being the lead, the nominee, that issue doesn't go away and is going to continue to haunt, particularly as the Republicans hit hard the issue of if he wasn't able to run, then he isn't able to continue to be the president, and she has to defend that, which is a mess of an issue to have to spend time being on defense about. Three, we know that one of 2 major issues that are the most difficult for the Democrats to deal with is immigration. She's obviously going to be tagged as the person charged with solving immigration. And that obviously is not if it's your most vulnerable issue, putting the person who has the greatest vulnerability on that issue at the lead of your ticket is questionable. Moreover, the best argument that the Democrats have is Biden came to agreement with the most conservative Republicans on the Hill for immigration reform, and Trump tanked it. Yet she wasn't the one credited with that legislative accomplishment. So you can't put that up in her column. She was nowhere to be seen in terms of how that legislative compromise was talked about. 4, this whole narrative, the prosecutor versus the criminal, I'm not understanding. The whole point of the Biden administration, Justice Department handing off to a special counsel the prosecution of Donald Trump was to make that a nonpartisan, non-political issue, that justice needed to be served, that no man was above the law, and think of it as anything but a partisan pursuit. While I think they may mean something different than the prosecutor versus the criminal when it comes to the specifics of the prosecutions against Donald Trump, it is going to be read as this is the person who is going to prosecute Donald Trump, and I think stands on its head the entire notion of depoliticized Justice Department pursuits. And 5, as many have talked about, she is a weaker communicator than the others that have been talked about. She is fine in front of a teleprompter. She's fine with scripted questions in a committee hearing. But being a really good impromptu speaker who can prosecute the case against Donald Trump clearly and crisply with sound bites that are capable of overcoming the shellacking she takes on social media of all kinds, it's very hard to be that kind of communicator if you don't have that natural skill. That isn't to say she hasn't improved somewhat in that regard, but to be what she needs to be, starting from the deficit of the other 4 issues, I just think she's got another liability there that the others don't have. Yes, she is going to light up certain constituencies, I think, in a stronger way than Biden could have. And she is no doubt a very strong advocate for women's rights, which does count for something significant when it comes to getting suburban women in particular to the polls. I am not I don't subscribe to the tribal view that the difficulty Biden had with support from Black Americans, which I think it had to do with economic policy issues of inflation and immigration, are going to be overcome necessarily just because she is the offspring of an Indian mother and a Black father. And I think that, yes, unifying the Democratic Party is important. And yes, getting the money rolling again quickly is important. But nothing's more important than putting the best candidate forward. And for all those reasons, looking at her as the best candidate is hard for me to do. Can she win still? Possibly.
Tom, would you like people to read your piece and figure out a way to create an actually contested convention, or you just want to put your doubts on out in the public square?
Well, the piece in Newsweek, I'd be happy for people to read. I think it's probably too late for a movement here if speculation is correct that she's going to have a majority of delegates wrapped up by Wednesday. I think that at least commitments from those delegates wrapped up by Wednesday. I think it's going to be too hard a hill to climb. But I do think I'm just surprised as a strong anti-Trumper how we got from she is a liability as a VP on the ticket, that a 24-hour coronation, that she's leading the ticket, where there were many strong voices within the Democratic Party talking about an open process and trying to drive it in that direction. How this could have happened with all that sitting against her relative to other candidates is just very hard for me to understand.
Tom, thank you. Also, please stay with us. David Burrell, who works with Two Way, he works for WIC Insights in Georgia, and David is going to join us now to talk about the polling. So, David, people have been asking me since I reported the president's intention to not seek the nomination about what does the polling say? Is she stronger? And what I've been saying is I don't care what the polling says, because we're now in about a 3-week race to the question of who's going to define Kamala Harris for the Americans who haven't been paying attention ever to her. Is it going to be her and her team, or is it going to be Mar-a-Lago? Some people have said to me just today, very smart Democrats have said she's wasting the day. You know, she went to the campaign headquarters in Wilmington. She did a sports event at the White House. They want to see her every day defining herself, because the Republicans on social media already, and soon on broadcast and cable, will be doing it, defining her in a different way. Tomorrow, she goes to Milwaukee for a political event. I'm not sure if it's a rally or not, at 2:00 Eastern time. So that'll be a big thing of her in the battlegrounds. And as people have pointed out, when she talks now, it's different, because she's talking now not as the vice president, but as the presumptive nominee. So, David, from what you've seen in the polling so far and projecting forward, just free form here, what should people be looking for in the polling now and going forward to determine her chances of beating Donald Trump? Hold on, David, you got on mute. I apologize.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Mark.
Go ahead. Thank you, David.
Yeah, so looking forward, I mean, I think the first thing people need to understand is not to pay too much attention to the next, 3 to 6 days, maybe 3 to 7 days of what the polling says. I think that in 10 days, though, we may have the most accurate polling we've seen thus far in the election. And the reason why I think that is for a couple of reasons, actually. So one is that, once Biden made his announcement, every single pollster in America went in the field for every single campaign. And we run a polling company. We know this very well, because we went in the field for all of our campaigns and all of our nonprofit groups, and every single person that wanted to see how is this going to impact the election. And that does have a dramatic impact on everyone's polls. So you might see polls kind of all over the place a little bit over the next, few days. And as those polls, kind of cycle out of the field, I think you're actually see something that's pretty great. And this is coming from someone who not over projected. We accurately projected Trump performing better than he did in 2016, and we did in 2020. However, at this point in 2024, I've actually thought the polls have been over-indexing his performance, and I think he has not been doing as well. And one of the reasons is I think that his supporters are people who are not anti-Trumpers. And look, there's Democrats who are not anti-Trumpers, there's independents who are not anti-Trumpers, and they're answering polls at a higher rate than the ones who don't like Trump, because the enthusiasm is there on their side. And the enthusiasm has been there on the, I'm not going to say the Republican side, but maybe those who don't, disdain Trump in the way that some others do for months now. And once the debate happened, it got worse for that, worse in this respect. And then after the assassination attempt, it even got more dramatic. So you're seeing a situation where in 10 days, and Mr. Rogers was right, that the media has done a 180 on Harris, and everyone's believing it. Feels like they are. And the enthusiasm is coming back. And the great thing about that is when enthusiasm comes back on both sides, is you get equal civic engagement, and polling is truly just civic engagement. And so I think you're going to see all people taking polls at, all subgroups of people taking polls at a more equal rate. And that's going to improve the accuracy of what we're going to see. I don't think we'll see it yet. I think we're going to see it in about 10 days. And this is also why when, I've been, benefited off this myself, actually, that, once you get closer to election, in September and August for the last few years, it looks like the pollsters are 10 points off. And then, right before the election, we get to say that we weren't that bad. But part of that's because civic engagement is very high right before an election. And so everyone's taking polls at equal rates. So kind of starts to level out our polling. But I think you're about to see the most accurate polls we've seen in this year. We'll see in about 10 to 14 days. And so I think we'll know where the race really stands pretty quickly.
David, thank you. Stay with us. I'm going to ask two people if they're willing to come on camera and unmute and let me spotlight them, who are two of the best journalists of the last several news cycles and beyond. Jill Abramson. Jill, are you willing to come join us? Let's see if I can lure Jill in here.
Sure.
All right, there's Jill. Jill, thank you.
Wearing a bathrobe, excuse.
That's all right. That's all right. I'm wearing my bathing ape t-shirt because I want to make sure everybody felt comfortable. Now, Jill is a veteran of two-way and grateful to have her. Someone who I think is joining us for the first time, another great journalist, Eleanor Cliff. Eleanor, I'd love for you to come on too, if you would. Let's see if I can lure Eleanor in here with us. Not so far. I'll wait to see if Eleanor is going to join. Jill, tell us what you think is going on with Kamala Harris and her prospects to be better than Tom Rogers fears.
Well, I think, her upside is that, we're witnessing one of the great honeymoon periods of press coverage that I've ever seen. And, it's happened very fast and with an intensity that, somewhat surprised me, just how positive the coverage has been. And especially focusing on the burst of fundraising, which is, a good sign for her. But, we really haven't seen her perform on the campaign trail yet. So it's impossible to know what in reality she's going to be like as a presidential candidate. I thought, I'm an admirer of hers. I should disclose that. I really thought when she was on the Senate Judiciary Committee, she was an excellent, tough questioner of the Trump judicial nominees. And, the height of that came with her confrontation with Brett Kavanaugh, which I thought was gutsy and smart and right. Most important of all. I don't really buy into what people find annoying about her. I don't really care. I like her laugh. I like her voice.
Jill, let me ask you, are you in the I think she can win this camp or in the I'm really worried she can't win this camp? You have to choose one of those.
I'm going to be wishy-washy. I honestly don't know because I haven't seen her perform yet.
Yeah. So the Wall Street Journal is reporting that the people being vetted is slightly different than the list I was told. Cooper and Shapiro both on the list, Kelly on the list. But they say the list does not include Beshear, but does include Whitmer, Governor Walz of Minnesota, and Governor Pritzker of Illinois. Totally excited to have Eleanor here. I believe, Eleanor, it's your first time on two-way. Delighted because you've covered so many presidentials and understand this. I'd love for you to just sort of freeform what you think of the vice president's chances, how you think America will, as they get to know her better, feel about her and her chances to beat Trump.
I buy the argument that this is a base election. Whichever side turns out their votes wins. It's going to be close. I think there are more of, quote, us than there are of them, meaning the Trump MAGA base. And I think she adds excitement. So she makes winning possible. For months, Biden has been doing everything. I mean, he's passed great legislation. He's spent millions of dollars putting his name and Democratic accomplishment out there. He could not break through. It was like spitting in the ocean. So I think the voters were telling us they just didn't want him, and maybe unfair. I don't think he's senile. I think he runs the country well, but he's clearly not up to an aggressive campaign of prosecuting against Trump. So the amount of money from grassroots people that Harris has raised, and I think a lot of Democrats are saying, okay, maybe we didn't like this or that about her, but we sure don't like Trump. She's the only vehicle. I think a sense of realism has entered the Democratic Party, and she's identified as a progressive. Of course, in California, they thought she was way too tough on crime, so there's some debate about that. But the Republicans are going to run against her as a radical lefty with a crazy laugh, and I think Democrats are happy now. Okay, pick a white man to run with you, to sort of stable and give the ticket a sense of moderation, because you got to win in the middle. You want those independents. So I think I think she has a real shot at winning. And and
Mark, I agree that said she has a shot, but I think she's got two really tough challenges on issues. The first is Biden. Well, two big ones. First one, Biden was unable to capitalize on what I agree with Eleanor is a strong record of accomplishment, because prices are out of control and everyone is upset about their grocery bills, their housing costs, etc. And they feel, despite whatever reality set we actually have, that somehow they were better off during Trump's 4 years than now. She has got to somehow change that dynamic, and that is difficult because she cannot control prices. She cannot, number one. And then you mentioned immigration. I think, the fact that that was her portfolio and it was a big failure is going to be an albatross around her neck. And, I think those two things make it very tough. They just do.
I'd love you both to talk about first Eleanor and then Jill, this issue of sexism and this the kind of overhang of Secretary Clinton, whether it's the media, whether it's the public, whether it's the Republicans on social media. How do you see where we are as a country and where the party is and where these candidates are compared to 2016? Eleanor, you first, please.
I mean, you can't rail against sexism when we now have a Black woman who's running, a Black and Asian woman who's running for president. And one possible ticket, I don't think it's going to happen, would be Gretchen Whitmer. And some people say two women, yay. But yeah, there's all the underhand comments. And the Republican convention, the fourth day was macho night. And so they're running on strength versus weakness. And I don't think you can characterize women as weak at all. But the mighty male and the protector and all of the classic descriptions of the Republican Party as the daddy party and the Democrats as the nanny party. I think that all comes into play. But I think you were right what you said earlier, Mark, about women out there. I don't know how organized they are, but boy, everybody's antenna is going to be up, and that plays into the reproductive rights issue as well.
Yep. Absolutely. Jill, before you answer, I want to read you an email I got today from a member of the two-way community. He said, I played golf today at my local Bucks County public course in Pennsylvania. A group of older men in their 70s were talking and were extremely rude about the vice president, calling her vulgar female names. I was surprised how strong their tone was in such a public setting.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm just not. And I'm speaking a little bit from personal experience here as, the former executive editor of the New York Times, the first and only woman so far, is that there is data galore that when a woman goes after the number one job, and in our country, that's the president, their likability, no matter how much they've been liked before, plummets. And there have been countless studies of this in the business world, in healthcare, everywhere. And I hope maybe we're gonna, have reached, a turning point on that and that it won't happen. But
Yep.
it certainly helped sink Hillary, and
Yep.
I'll be watching out.
Yep. Very, very grateful to both of you for joining. I hope you're going to indulge me as I say goodbye to you. I want you to stay, but bring other people into the spotlight, but please
Sure.
stay. Double mandatory prediction. Who will he choose? Who should he choose? Jill Abramson, Vice President. Who will she choose? Who should she choose?
I'm with you on Mark Kelly.
Should choose, but who will she choose?
Same here. And two for the price of one, Gabby Giffords and her national platform.
So you both think he should choose and will choose Mark Kelly?
Yes. It's interesting to me, the talk about William McRaven. Is he seriously gettable by either party? I don't think so.
I don't think so. I also am not sure that he's ready to be on the political stage, as impressive a guy as he is.
Right.
I've heard stuff about his managing university politics, which admittedly are tougher than presidential politics, but nonetheless,
Right.
Not necessarily ready to be a politician even for a couple months. So grateful to both of you for joining. I'm going to unspotlight you, but leave you unmuted. So please feel free to jump back in. And we're going to go to members of the community. Again, thank you so much both for joining without my having to even ask you to join, which is lovely. I want to bring in Jessica, ask you to unmute Jessica, and I'm going to put you here in the spotlight. There you go. Jessica, go ahead. Oh, sorry. Go ahead and unmute.
All right. Okay.
Welcome back, Jessica. Go ahead. Question or comment. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, so I have to say that prior to the official dropout, I was a little nervous if Harris would get the same kind of, I don't know. I didn't even know anything about her, to be honest with you. And as soon as the endorsements started rolling in, there's so much enthusiasm in my friend group and in my social media spaces, and it feels like such a weight is lifted. I mean, I was not necessarily like diehard Harris. I mean, I would have voted for her. I think I told you, yeah, I would prefer her to Biden. It's so weird because I think that seeing him actually step down is almost like this, there's this realization that we actually have some hope. I think it felt so much like a long shot. And for it to actually happen and to see a real candidate in his place and for it to actually be happening is so different than a hypothetical of would you prefer? And I don't know. I feel really good about her.
Jessica, in your friend groups, what are people enthusiastic about? Simply the fact that she's there or abortion rights? What are people enthusiastic about?
I think they're just so enthusiastic that somebody under 80 is on the ticket and primarily someone who can argue our points. I feel like Democrats have better policies and we're terrible at explaining them or defending ourselves. And for so long, it's like we've had this sort of, I don't want to be disrespectful to Joe Biden. I don't feel like he has ever really made a strong case. You know, he may be somewhat likable, but he was never someone I could get super excited about. And he's just not good at selling himself. And I don't really think he ever was. And to be honest, even back when Hillary was running, it was like I could never get really excited about her. I felt like there was so much baggage. She just was not as likable. It was not as easy to rally around her. Kamala feels like an underdog. And even though I hear the right saying, oh, you guys should be so mad you didn't get a democratic process, we're just so lucky we have a viable candidate and so grateful that I'm not sensing that like infighting that I thought there would be. There's a lot more of just great gratitude. Like we are so grateful to have her and just to see her deliver her speech tonight to the campaign. It felt so hopeful. It really did.
Jessica, remind everybody, you live in Florida, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And do you consider yourself a Democrat?
I do now. I consider I was a Republican for a while. I feel like this past 4 years has made me a Democrat. So
right. Okay. And Christine, who's joining us now, is Christine, are you still a Republican?
I am still, I consider myself a real Republican, Mark, but I'm definitely
right.
more in the kind of independent camp these days. So
Right. So I think you two are in roughly the same place, but I'd love for you to let us eavesdrop on a chat between the two of you. Just talk about, just you two talk about how you're feeling about the Vice President Harris and about the race right now.
and then can I ask a tactical question, a short one?
You absolutely can. But you two just chat about what you're hearing, how you feel, and we'll all listen in. Go ahead.
Listening to Jessica, I felt very like I've had a similar experience over the last 24 hours. My friend group, I would say it's a range from feeling really energized about Kamala Harris. And those were mainly people that I think were going to vote for Joe Biden unenthusiastically anyway, to people who are very curious. I mean, they have bought in, I think, to some degree to a lot of the media hype and the public hype about, everything from Kamala's record, understandably, but also to silly things like her laugh and comments about coconut trees and that sort of thing. But I do think that maybe that group in the middle are going to wait and see. These are early hours of what we're experiencing or what we're seeing. And I do think more people are going to be open to her. And I think the vice presidential candidate could be an energizing factor for sure. And I think that there just may be that sense. I mean, I kind of cut my early political teeth during the Clinton Gore, Bush Quayle years. And I just remember that sense of energy when Clinton chose Gore. I just think there's going to be, something like that maybe this year.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I do want you two to talk to each other.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But
Jessica,
that's okay.
how are you?
But that's okay. But Christine, I agree with you. To me, if it's Kelly, there's a potential for the Clinton Gore effect, which is bigger than, as John Lawrence said, bigger than just a state or just punching the ticket, but some alchemy between them of excitement.
Yep. And I'll ask Jessica a question. I mean, I don't know about you. I watched a good bit of the Republican convention last week just because I also was curious about, would we see a new Trump? What was JD Vance going to be like? I'd be interested in your thoughts and if you had any moments like I did of being like, maybe I'm going to give this guy more of a chance. And I definitely had my moments where I did. And then Thursday night came and I felt like, oh, same stuff, different, same day, kind of thing, same stuff, different day.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jessica, you're muted. I apologize. Thank you.
Sorry, I think I accidentally did it. Yeah, so I watched the RNC, quite a bit of it, even though I knew it would kind of make my blood pressure rise. And I was actually really interested to give JD Vance a chance. When I realized who he was, I was like, oh, I saw that Glenn Close movie. That was actually, I think I really liked that movie. And I thought maybe this guy's like, okay, let me just do a little research. And it was like, oh my God, he could not have said more problematic things. I mean, particularly the abusive marriage stuff, like the whole, like, you should stay in a marriage, even, sometimes there's violence, but what are you going to do? It's like, what are you talking about? He's, I don't know if he's trying to sound as much like a mini Trump as he possibly can. I'm hoping that, maybe the person he was 5 or 6 years ago when he was texting his roommate about Trump not being a good idea, I'm hoping that's more who he really is. But either way, I feel like at the very least, it tells me that he's an opportunist who is probably just trying to get ahead and doing whatever is politically expedient. But I think he is going to really scare women off. I know someone mentioned a couple of meetings ago about Project 2025. And I think the feedback was kind of like, oh, no one's really saying anything about that. But people, whether they fully understand it, people have heard Project 2025. And to me, JD Vance is like almost like the poster child for that. And so I don't know. I think it's a bad look. It really is.
Again, just talk to each other about Project 2025 and what's happening in your circles about that, please. I was just
going to say, Jessica, I have the same sort of experience. A lot of friends, women especially, who are concerned about that. And then there are others who feel like, well, we haven't been stomped on that badly yet. I'm more concerned about the border. I'm more concerned about inflation, those types of issues. And I tend to be somebody who I like to listen to my friends, concerns and understand how they're thinking that way and kind of what tends to be more important to them. Obviously, we know women aren't kind of all the same in terms of those issues. So it's been interesting to watch.
Right. I agree. I feel like what's interesting is that everyone I know who is more conservative or who that I know will vote Trump or has in the past, none of them are defending Project 2025. All they're doing is trying to sort of distance. Well, that's not really what he's going to do. I haven't heard one person, even the most conservative people I know, none of them have said, oh, well, it's actually a good idea. I agree that we should get rid of no-fault divorce. I agree that, abortion should be banned at 6 weeks. No one, and I do know some pretty conservative people. So, that to me is where it really becomes an issue of like making sure people understand that some of these ideas in Project 2025, I understand that that's not necessarily everything that will happen. And that it is, it's the Heritage Foundation. It's not necessarily Trump, but I mentioned this the last time I was on. The Supreme Court, what the Supreme Court has done to me is enough warning. Now I know this is possible. And I had this conversation with my mom, who still wants to vote for Trump. And I said, she says, he's not going to do anything that bad. It'll be fine. Because she's more concerned about things like the border and inflation. And I said, I said, it may be that Donald Trump doesn't really want to do those things, but he will do them. And that's all that matters. I don't care what he really feels like, if he really doesn't care about no-fault divorce or abortion, but I know that he can and will and might owe people favors. I'm not going to put that kind of trust in him and gamble that maybe he won't be as bad as he's promising us he will be.
And that's the challenge, is what do you think the odds are of it happening? Like, how much are you willing to put at risk to see what actually happens come November or January or whenever it would be into the new kind of election or the new governance year?
Yeah, exactly.
Ladies,
Totally.
I listen to you two talk all night, but
Can I ask
I'm
one
bringing
quick
in
question, Mark, before Nan
Go
talks?
ahead, and I'll bring in Nan. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I
Yeah,
know
of course.
this is, and that was fun, by the way. I know these are early days, for everything that's happening, but how are you handicapping the impact, of the awkwardness Kamala Harris may face from Joe Biden continuing to be president while she campaigns? He's got to do more than keep the lights on. He's going to have some activities and potentially, do things that could step on her message. How do you see that coordinated? Thank you.
Well, here's my view, and thank you, and stay with it, because I want you two to listen and talk to Nan. And I know lots of folks have their hands up, and I'm sorry we're not going to get to everybody, but I'm enjoying this and learning so much from this. I want to keep it going. I want Nan to be able to represent the Trump position. My view is, if she had to be president and a candidate, it'd be very difficult. It's just too much of a time management issue, and she would be on the hook for making a lot of decisions. So just from it's a trade-off, because maybe she'd benefit in some ways from being president and running as an incumbent. Although, as Tom Rogers said, it's not the era of the incumbent. I think as long as Joe Biden can keep creating problems for her, she's much better off being a full-time candidate rather than having to run the government, be commander in chief, and risk having the whole thing come down if there's a international crisis, say. So that's my view of it. Nan Hayworth, for those of you who don't know, is a former Republican member of Congress. She's a doctor, and she's a Trump supporter, and she's going to explain to you two and to the rest of us the 2025 project, and comment on whatever else she wants to. Dr. Hayworth, thank you. Please go.
Oh, thank you, Mark, and thanks all for fascinating discussion. I can tell you with great certainty that President Trump, although I am not in any kind of personal touch with him, but he has zero intention of implementing Project 2025. There are parts of it that I think it's worthwhile for all of us to contemplate certain aspects of it concerning fiscal issues and the way in which we manage our judiciary. There are some good ideas in Project 2025. Heritage is known for being extremely socially conservative. I am not a social conservative. I am a classical liberal and a libertarian. So I too don't want to see divorce touched. I don't want to see anybody interpose government between women and their health care. Fundamentally, I'm reasonably certain that President Trump, in fact, entirely certain that President Trump feels the same way about those things. And I think J.D. Vance understands as well, and I don't know him personally, but that these are issues that are of critical importance to get right and to stay right on them with the electorate. And the only way you can ever implement that kind of sweeping change is from the grassroots. There's no way, I know, having been in Congress, there is no way, nor would you properly expect there to be, that Congress nor a president can somehow impose these things on the American public if they are unwilling to accept them. Anybody who was elected, any Congress that was elected tried to do that against the broader will of the American people would very quickly be eliminated. Certainly a House of Representatives would turn it over in 2 years, and that would be that. So I hope I can provide reassurance to folks listening about that. I do recognize that it becomes a powerful political talking point. And, obviously both parties have much at stake. So a lot of invective is going to be flying. But in terms of the Project 2025 aspect, that is a particular bent of the Heritage Foundation. In fact, they have such agendas with every major election cycle. For decades, at least, this has been going on. President Trump will not be implementing Project 2025. He has said so definitively in his rallies, and I know that he is aware that it would not be something that would sit well.
Do you think, Nan, that
Go ahead, Christine.
just given that though, and the sense that a lot of people have, and certainly what we're going to hear, I think, from this campaign, that Project 2025 is a Trump, brainchild, even if it's not.
Sure.
Wouldn't it benefit Trump if he really believes that, to come out very proactively and say, hey, I want to support women's health care. I want to support access to contraception. I want to do more to help with, unwanted pregnancies in terms of funding or supporting other programs. Sometimes I find that the silence, leads people to think there's some degree of being complicit, with programs that are maybe to some, if you feel like they're unfairly being tied to the candidate, they've got to do more to kind of unleash themselves from it.
Well, I know what he has done is number one, he has strongly denounced Project 2025 in his rallies. He said, look, it's not mine. I have nothing to do with it. I am not intending to implement it. And in the abbreviated, quite concise platform that he made his own, when he told our, strongly pro-life affiliates, look, we are not going to seek any kind of abortion ban. That's not what we're about. And he's been willing to make that explicit. He has also removed long-standing provisions concerning making explicit that we consider marriage only to be valid between a man and a woman. President Trump has removed that, and I applaud it for many reasons. So he has made affirmative efforts in that regard. I think he is concentrating, understandably, on other things. And I do think that because, and I do hear the arguments, gee, it seems as though, the Democrats can never explain their policies well. I come at it from a different perspective. So like, well, because they don't really work, and you can't explain them away, because, we do have a lot of troubles that can, reliably be traced to misguided government action, the kind of thing that the Democratic Party tends to support. I'm not saying Republicans are perfect. They could certainly always strive for better and more constraint, but that's the challenge. We've got a lot of issues that are, as we know from polling, in terms of inflation, in terms of housing affordability, in terms really of healthcare affordability at this point. That too is a problem, and the PPACA has not helped us. Many, including myself, predicted that. And the border crisis. So they've got a lot of issues on which they can speak and challenge now candidate Harris and Democrats quite effectively. So I think, the Democrats are going to look for something like a Project 2025 that they can hang around the necks of Republicans like an albatross. And it's going to be up to Republicans to make sure that they, don't allow that to happen.
All right, I need to warn our affiliates, we're going to go a little bit over. And I want to, you three stay if you can. I want to bring in two people. I believe both are Trump supporters, Mick and Pete. Mick, you first. I'd love you to just comment on what you've heard, or say or ask anything you want, and the others can engage as they see fit.
Thank you. I'm from Florida. I originally was a Darrell Castle voter, if anyone remembers him in 2016. I couldn't pull the trigger for either of the candidates. Then in 2020, I happened to notice that the petty, pompous narcissist actually did a pretty good job of being a president. So I voted for Trump in 2020. I'm not sure people realize that Kamala Harris has the single farthest left voting record during her tenure as a senator. She was edging out Bernie Sanders for the #1 spot as being the most progressive senator. How is she going to use her limited stump skills to run away from not only this record, but Joe Biden and all the baggage that comes with that, and all the other issues that all the other guests have mentioned. I just don't see how she can do it myself. I know she's going to get a lot of enthusiasm, but I think she's going to hit with a splat when she gets on the stump. That's just my opinion.
Okay. Thank you, Mick. Thank you. Go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment about the gender gap. I know in the past there's been a lot of talk about the gender gap on the female side, but I looked at the polling. There's a huge gender gap on the male side, and I was wondering what the Democrats are planning to do to address that male gender gap.
Put an astronaut on the ticket. An astronaut who wears a leather jacket, distinguisty military record.
And I guess to expand that, the Carville comments about, he talked about this issue a couple weeks or so ago, and that's something I think that a lot of people have heard that because Carville's obviously an influencer guy, but I wonder what the people are thinking about. Are they even see it as a problem on the Democratic side? Do you want to deal with it, or are they just going to say, hey, we're right off the male population?
No, they do, but that's why I think Kelly's got a great chance to be on the ticket, and I think she may well take some policy positions that are to the right of the president, to the center of the president. For instance, two people suggested to me today she should call for the firing of the head of the Secret Service, even if the president's not for it. That may be a way to create some distance and look tough. It's a strange thing to just the reality of gender. How does a female candidate look tough? And Secretary Clinton really struggled with this, and I think clearly lost in part because Trump out-toughed her. And we'll have to see how she handles it. But one way to do it would be to take on the party at least a little bit on some issues. And as is correctly pointed out, she's got a very liberal record. And part of being the mommy party is having positions that are left. So we'll see what she does about that. Pete, thank you. Very grateful to you for joining. I'm gonna say again that I'm very sorry we didn't get to more folks with their hands up. Love seeing people participate. If this is your first time on the platform, you got a great episode. It's really reflective of what we're trying to do here. You heard different voices talking about different things and different perspectives. And as far as I heard, nobody shouted at anybody else or insulted anybody else. And that's what two-way is about. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time, the morning meeting, Sean Spicer, Tim Hogan, and I, maybe some special guests. We'll talk about the day ahead in the presidential race, including the vice president's trip to Wisconsin and what's going on with the Veep stakes. So join us for that. Tomorrow at 6 o'clock Eastern time, my two-way colleague Lauren Leader, special episode of her program on two-way majority rules, talking to the Reverend Al Sharpton, who's very close to both President Biden and the vice president. So you want to tune in for that. And then I may well be back tomorrow night. I'm traveling tomorrow. And so I may or may not see you in the evening or the afternoon. We shall see. Very grateful to everybody for joining. Eleanor and Jill and Tom and David and John Lawrence, and everyone who participated from the community. Couldn't be more grateful to you for being part of this. As always, I learned a ton, and I hope you did too. And we'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Good night.